Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have an awesome show for you this week. We're going to talk about the most powerful road legal BMW ever. You might be surprised about which one it is and also how it looks. We're going to talk about the new proposed EPA rules that will lower CO2 emissions drastically by the end of the decade. We'll get into that a little bit. Don't want to be too heavy. We'll also talk about what we've been driving. The Ioniq 6, the Toyota 4Runner 40th anniversary. I can't wait to hear about that one. Infiniti QX60, and of course, an update on our long-term Toyota Sienna. We will spend your money too. With that, let's bring in senior editor for all things electric and green, Beltz Snyder. What's up, man?
Nothing, just enjoying the nice warm spring weather. It's I finally have been able to get the Beetle out again now that all the salt is off the roads and everything's running well, and just trying to think of things I can do to it next. So
that could be a podcast.
Yeah. Went from the season of skiing to the season of long leisurely drives and driving for fun. Although I think driving in the snow is fun, but those long drives where you just sort of meander and go out to nowhere just for the sake of driving. I love that weather. So here we are.
Yeah, it got here quick. I think spring took a long time to get here, and now we're almost in like summer. I think it's going to be 85 today or 81. So yeah, that's pretty hot for April.
Yeah, and we'll probably still get one more snow day at some point.
Oh, definitely.
Well, last year we had some a snow flurry in May, so it might not be over, but yeah, this is, I don't know. I'm happy about being able to roll the windows down and taking the breeze.
Yeah, looking to get in some golf this weekend, so I'm hoping
Nice.
I'm hoping I can do that. We'll see, but yeah. So lots of our news section's kind of a little all over the place. So we might as well kick things off with this brand new Red Label Red. Excuse me, Red Label. I believe is Johnny Walker, right?
Yeah.
This is the XM Label Red. 738 horsepower and 738 pound-feet of torque. That's like demon Hellcat figures, right?
It's wild.
And yeah, man. I mean, and then of course it's got the red accents on the wheels and the grill. So you got to check out the story. You got to see these pictures first of all. But I'm a little surprised here that this is the approach they were taking. But it's kind of cool, kind of fun. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely polarizing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's funny. I've had at gatherings and stuff. I have other friends who have come up and start talking to me about the XM specifically because it's attention grabbing, and most of the comments I've heard have been pretty positive. And this label Red, I mean, just looking at it is it's pretty intense. It's a wild looking vehicle, the XM in general. But with all in black, it sort of, I don't know, tones down some of the weird angles and stuff. But then the red accents highlight things like the kidney grills, which kind of controversial design there. But I think it looks really neat. My eye is definitely drawn to it. It's just sort of a ridiculous vehicle, which is kind of fun. I mean, it's this big BMW with, over 700 horsepower. 0 to 60, 3.7 seconds. It's wild. I mean, it's kind of a superlative, modern BMW, and taking things in a strange design direction. It's still settling into my soul a little bit. It's taking a little bit to get used to it, but I think maybe I like it. it.
Yeah, same. I mean, it reminds me almost of like I'm kind of into watches, and every now and then you'll hear about kind of random offshoot, like especially Seiko. They'll do just like random styles of watches that are like serious riffs on the existing line. I think the weird grill, a little bit larger, a little bit like sometimes tweaked as far as the shape. Mm-hmm. I like it on the muscle cars, I like it on crossovers, and I like it on electrics. I think some of the more traditional, like the 3 and the 5 series, I tend to like a more traditional grill usually. But in this thing, it works. my mind is kind of blown that they're getting all this power from the 4.4 liter twin turbo V8 with the electric, the electric motor.
Mhm.
They really in base trim, it's under like 500 horsepower. It's like 480 some, as far as just the basic, spec of the engine. And then boom, like almost 300 more horsepower thanks to, the electric assist. So I think that's kind of cool. And yeah, the design department earned its money. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, they're taking chances, that's for sure. But yeah, also, I also like that, it's a plug-in hybrid. With a pretty, pretty big battery, enough to go about 30 miles on electricity alone, and can go on electric up to 87 miles per hour. So if you want to drive it just as an electric, when you don't need to tap those full 738 horsepower and you're just doing some, dropping the kids off at school or whatever, you can do a lot of driving just under electric power, which is impressive in something like this, something so powerful and so big. Usually that range is shrunken down quite a bit, and just the e-motor's there more for power than for anything else. But the fact that we're still able to maintain some driving range on this is cool to me.
Sounds good. Well, let's do a hard shift over to the news of the day. EPA announced major emissions cuts. This is for new vehicles sold in the United States. It goes through 2032. And the way it breaks down is that, if all of the different pieces of this were to come to pass, 2/3 of cars sold would be electric in the next 10 years, which is, a drastic change from where we are. You think back to 2013, doesn't seem that long ago. So, fast forward, 10 years, and that's a dramatic makeover of, what people will be buying and how they purchase new vehicles. So it's definitely interesting. It's interesting to me too, how they really zeroed in on the CO2 emissions as well. That's not often an area where it seems like the government fully articulates, or even automakers fully articulate for passenger cars. You tend to hear more about that like in Europe, or even, heavy duty trucks. You don't see that so much with new cars. And again, there's a lot of pieces to it. Check out our coverage. Again, to unpack some of this, it really, I would say, my instant analysis is that, to me, this feels like the Biden administration wants reducing carbon footprint, and doing so through electric cars to be a big part of its legacy. You don't see one of its agencies, in this case, the EPA, take such, ambitious action without it being a broader part. And I think it's a good thing. I think a lot of the things you've noticed, you'll see when people have sort of dissonance with this, is it's like, how do I want this type of car? Or how will I charge it? I think, broadly speaking, a lot of people are very much in favor of, trying out these types of cars, having an open mind. So we'll see. I mean, what do you think?
It's ambitious, that's for sure. But it's a 10-year plan. And like you said, 2013 doesn't seem all that long ago, but think of how much different cars are now from 10 years ago. And especially in the last 3 years, the cars are buying, there's a lot more EVs on the road, a lot more hybrids on the road. Plug-in hybrids weren't really a thing then. So it's changed a lot. And it's I think come 10 years from now, it's not going to seem like, things will have changed a lot, but I don't think it's going to feel like that drastic of a lifestyle change to us as maybe we're expecting right now. I'm glad that this is focusing on CO2 rather than just fuel economy or anything, because that CO2 is the important thing. However you can get to lower CO2, whether it's just adding more, like Toyota wants to do, add more hybrids so so there's more miles driven with electric power, even if there's still gas powering a lot of these vehicles. If the goal is CO2, focus on CO2, and there's a various number of ways to get there. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, with all these things, the loopholes pop up. Right now, folks are saying that this could be sort of a difficult thing to dial back, under another president. But I'm sure, the next administration, should they decide to try to unravel this, they'll find ways. And that's just sort of how our government works, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think it's how it's designed to work, which I don't think is a bad thing. But that's, I think this is probably just going to be more of that. So I'm not too, I don't think it's too earth shaking. But yeah, on paper right now, it does seem, it seems pretty ambitious, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not all that big of a deal, really.
It's a big headline for today. It's certainly creating, it's making a lot of news. I usually have like the CNN morning show on in the background to see what else is going on. And it was bigger news than some like huge toxic fire in Indiana, which seems really bad because it's like that's not that far from Michigan. And the people like covering it were wearing these big like ventilator masks. I was like, oh, great. Yeah, let's hope the wind is not blowing eastbound here or north. But yeah, one callback when you mentioned 10 years ago, the Obama administration proposed really stricter CAFE standards. Mm-hmm. And that started to get on track, but it was going to take a very long time. Trump took office in 2017, rolled them all back. Biden took office in 2021, rolled them all back forward, rolled back what Trump did. Mm-hmm. And then, you get this. So it will be interesting to see how, if Biden were to run and win another term, then obviously you would probably see a good chunk of this get executed because mm-hmm. that's 6 more years down the road. If a different president were to take office, priorities could change. It reminds me too a little bit of like really ambitious things that FDR, which I know Biden has, tried to compare himself to, Harry Truman, Eisenhower with the interstate highway system. These are things that when they're ranking presidents, that sort of show up in the Hall of Fame plaque, if you will. So to me, I'm thinking, perhaps the administration wants electric cars and CO2 emissions to be a big part of it, because you could argue this is the most significant, environmental legislation since the Clean Air Act, which was 1972 mm-hmm. or 1970. And I think that was Nixon. So, presidents really like to dig into this. And, politically, there's a lot of cover for Biden because it's also an EPA move, which is a little different than some of the CAFE things that we saw, in the last 5 to 10 years. It's interesting. I think it's kind of cool in politics and regulatory affairs and manufacturing intersect. I think you get a lot of pushback from different stakeholders, but as a journalist, I find it super compelling.
And another thing to note is that, going forward, if this does get enacted and put into play, that becomes part of the playbook for car manufacturers going forward. And they're planning their products, 10, 15, 20 years in advance.
Yeah.
And so they have to play by those rules early on in that. And if things get rolled back, they've already that train's already going down the track. And it's hard for them to sort of, go back. And it's kind of pointless at that point too, once they've done all the development for these new powertrains and new technologies, and scaled up development and manufacturing for them to, now we don't have to worry about emissions as much. Let's go back to our old technology. Now that's not going to happen. So yeah, once the ball gets rolling, and it clearly is rolling in the eyes of manufacturers already. Again, like this is just sort of, I feel like it sounds pretty ambitious on paper, but like it's going to be sort of par for the course, and it's going to feel pretty normal going forward, especially when automakers are already driving this sort of change toward EVs.
Yeah, when you look at all the press releases that we've seen in the last couple of years about how this car company is going to be 50% electric by 2030, this one's going to be all electric, this one's going to be like, 30%, so it does seem like a lot of car companies are definitely on that path. It tracks with what I think most of them are investing most heavily in, especially, you look at Ford, General Motors, Volkswagen, Tesla, obviously, Mercedes, BMW, like they all have electric plans.
Yeah, you can keep going.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know anybody who doesn't really have an electric plan. Stellantis and Toyota kind of held out for a minute as far as like what they were going to do, but now they're definitely going down that road as well.
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
All right, so let's talk about what we're driving today in our current fleets. Kind of go back and forth here between ICE and hybrid and all sorts of things. But the Ioniq 6, that's a big deal car for Hyundai. It's sort of like the hotly anticipated follow-up, slightly different shape to the Ioniq 5, which we all have been very impressed with. I think it's a beautiful, looking EV. It's got that almost like, tell me if I'm crazy here, but like 1930s Art Deco teardrop shape. For sure. I love it. So what's it like to drive?
It's great. So it's got the same powertrain as, the Ioniq 5, Kia EV6, Genesis GV60. So, you'd think it would just be basically drive like those. And in terms of, acceleration, things like that, it does. But it's got a sort of a sportier feel through the suspension. The way it traces the undulations in the roads, while still filtering out, the cracks in the roads and whatnot. It's definitely more of a sporty ride than the Ioniq 5, which sort of is a little more isolated and, cushy. The thing is, with this shape, you'd think you would lose a lot of room in this car, and you do lose some headroom in the front, especially that sloping windshield. It aims sort of right for your forehead if you're really tall. I have sort of a short torso. I'm 6 foot, but most of my height is in my legs, so I was fine in it. Someone who's taller might have a little trouble in the front seat, but there's an incredible amount of legroom, front and rear. I could put my seat way back and still sit behind myself with more than enough room. Kind of crazy how big this thing is on the inside. I mean, when you can put the cab that far forward without a motor up front, I guess it makes a little bit of sense. But it's sort of an illusion looking at it from the outside and then stepping inside and seeing how big it is. I was really impressed with how easy it was to get really great economy in this thing. I started off in the long range all-wheel drive, and I was in Scottsdale, Arizona, driving around town, was seeing easily into the mid 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which I thought was crazy good, especially for all-wheel drive. And then later I got into the SE rear-wheel drive with the long-range battery. And so let's see, that the all-wheel drive will do 316 miles on a charge. That's what it's rated. The rear-wheel drive will do 361 miles on a charge. And I was pushing closer to 400 miles if I had extended my drive throughout the day. At one point, there was I drove from a park back to our hotel about 30 miles. There was a change in elevation, a couple hundred maybe like 500, close to 500 feet that I descended over 30 miles, which, depending on how you look at it, that could be like one hill in a neighborhood, or, in this case, it's, a gradual decline. But at the end of that, I had, and a lot of that was through, stop and go traffic, a lot of stoplights. And at the end of that, I was seeing like 6.2 miles per kilowatt hour. That's what it was reading on the thing, which is, insane. That would be, well over 400 miles of range. So I think this would be a really easy one to hypermile. They made some changes, with chips and stuff, to eke out, and of course with the aerodynamic shape of the 6 compared to the 5, it's just easier to get more range out of this thing. And then the wheel size is another thing. The 18-inch wheels on the SE rear wheel drive help get that 361 miles of range. And I didn't find that with the 18-inch wheels that it suffered anything really in ride compared to the bigger wheels on the higher trims. So if I were going to buy this car, it would be hard. I mean, I'm in Michigan, so all-wheel drive sounds good, but it'd be hard for me to not go with the rear-wheel drive with all that range, because it's just so efficient. The amount of you'd be spending on electricity to charge this, it's one of the most efficient cars there are, period. So, but yeah, other than that, really impressive. It has sort of its own style. Definitely on the exterior, definitely looks way different than the Ioniq 5, as opposed to this blocky RoboCop looking thing. This is sort of, like you said, an Art Deco sort of bubble teardrop shape, real swoopy car. And inside, it's a little less lounge-like than the Ioniq 5. There's some of the same, like the screens are the same. Some of the switch gear is the same, but the textures on the door panels and things like that are unique to the Ioniq 6. So it definitely feels like a different car inside. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more time to drive this. One thing that really surprised me about this was how much people thought it looked like a Porsche 911. I know that there's that sort of ducktail spoiler in the back and whatnot, but stopping at the entrance to a park and asking the attendants there what they thought of the car, they're like, it looks like a Porsche. I'm like, oh man. And the designers were talking about how the elephant in the room is people keep saying this looks like a Porsche, but it's designed the way it is because air is air and aerodynamics is aerodynamics. Yeah, so I don't really know if I buy the 911 thing, but I think it definitely looks good, especially from the rear.
Yeah, actually, as I look at it, I can sort of see that kind of like ducktail in back a little bit, and the way the headlights are, they're not pop-up, but they're kind of, I can see it. If you really want to look, let's put it that way. Good looking car. I almost like it more than the Ioniq 5. Like, I don't know quite, just from a design standpoint. The Ioniq 5 is cooler. It's got more of that 80s vibe. But there's something about it. It's so throwback. You don't see cars that look like this anymore. So I give them all the credit in the world. This is definitely on my short list of things I'm very excited to drive this year. Like you, I feel like if I had to own it, I'd get all-wheel, but to me, that looks like a rear-wheel drive car. Mm-hmm. So that's intriguing to me as well. The inside, looking at the pictures, it's more different than I thought it would be from the Ioniq 5, just given that, they do share a fair amount of, elements, but it's different. It's interesting. It's a different buyer. So
yeah. And this,
I'm into it.
Another thing about this one, and we saw on Kia EV9 that they're adding a EV route planner. This has that. So this is the first Hyundai with the EV route planner. So you can sort of put charging stops into your route, and it'll sort of pick the best ones for along your way, which is something that folks have been asking for. Tesla has done a good job with that, and not a lot of other people do. You have to sort of go to third-party apps to plan your trips. So this has that in it. I didn't really get a chance to use that much. I know there are some limitations, like it doesn't take into account how much time you're going to spend at the charger, because that depends on a lot of variables. But there's more tech like that in this, and that we're going to see in more Hyundai Group EVs coming forward.
Sounds good. Well, let's transition back, if you will. Got a couple of Toyotas here. 4Runner, Sienna. Let's do Sienna real quick. We're gonna actually trade that later this week, I believe. I was just looking at my calendar. I'm like, oh, John, it's coming over on Thursday or Friday. It looks like. Yeah. So that's cool. It
depends on when the Bentley gets here. So.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, just whenever is fine. There's no rush. But that's a funny sentence. It depends on when the Bentley gets here.
Yep.
Anyways, future podcast. We can talk about that one. It's the Bentayga, right?
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. I might try to get to a Cars and Coffee with that this weekend. That should be fun. And, try to time it when it's not rush hour so you can have some fun on the road with that too, Anyways, Sienna long-termer, I just gassed it up. I feel like we're just having a conversation, not just podcasting here. So it's pretty full. I do need to dust out all of the sand from it from Gulf Shores. I put 2,000 miles on it from Michigan to Gulf Shores. We were staying right on like the Alabama-Florida border. It's right on the beach. The water and the beaches are so beautiful. We just literally were at the beach for like a week. So that was fun. The Sienna was great. It really was. I mean, super fuel efficient, averaged over 32 miles per gallon for most trips. I mentioned a lot of this on the podcast last week, but it's just a great road trip car. I think you're going to really like it.
Yeah. Well, it's going to get more sand in it because it's going to probably end up going up north to our cottage on Lake Huron. So
nice.
Don't worry too much about that.
Okay. Well, there's some Cheez-Its and Fruit Loops in there too. I got to get those out too.
Lola will find those and enjoy those.
So the dog rode home in the Sienna. I thought from her vacation, I thought she would eat most of these. I thought she would take care of this for me, and she apparently was just too tired. So there's a few snacks in there. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think the navigation. I'll be interested to hear what you think about it. It's super it's the latest Toyota version of their infotainment and navigation. It's very aggressive, and it was almost making us nervous because it kept recalculating time and distance. And because we were stuck in these traffic jams, it just kept adding like an hour or two to the trip. And it was driving us crazy. We're like, oh my gosh, we left and it was a 10-hour trip and now it's an 11-hour trip, So I guess that's good because we stopped in Cincinnati on the way home because we're like, well, we're not going to make it home. I can't drive another 4 hours. It's 11 o'clock. I've been driving for 16 hours. So I'll be interested to hear what you think about that. I drove in eco mode a lot too, just because I try to sip as much fuel as possible. And I do that around town too, quite frequently. It's just, it's not exactly a Testarossa. So there's no real benefit in driving it in some other mode. Although you do notice it's a little bit of hamstrung, if you will, compared to some of the different modes you could play with. There's a million ways to open the doors. I need to do a video of this before it goes over to you. It's like the key fob, right by the dome light for the driver. You've got the door handle, a button in the door handle, which is what my son uses. He likes to just push the button. There's probably a couple other ways that I don't even know about, but it's a great family hauler. I think it's, I don't know. I'll be interested to hear how your rankings maybe change or don't change after this. If you don't want to plug in, this to me might be the one to get. Yeah. A lot of people really like the Odyssey, but this one it's a hybrid and it's more fuel efficient. So, there's that. The Kia Carnival, I think, looks really good, like really good.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, this is a hybrid, so
yeah.
lot to consider there.
It's hard to give up that fuel economy of the Sienna. It's really good. Especially, you don't really lose anything with all-wheel drive either. You lose what one mpg or something.
Yep, you won't notice it.
Yeah. And it's got a really configurable interior too. Doesn't have stow and go, but most other things don't.
Yeah.
And it has seats that slide. Second row seats that slide back and forth quite a bit. So if you want to convert it from hauling your family to hauling materials home from the hardware store or the lumber store, it's good. It'd be good for moving offices or moving apartments in too. But yeah, I drove it briefly for the first drive during the pandemic. So I didn't really get to do the road trip thing with it. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing with it. I mean, 'cause that's the great thing about minivans. Just pile everyone in. Everyone makes himself at home, sort of cordons off their own corner of the vehicle, and that's their little fort with and it's fun. And like you said with the doors, man, like kids can just play with the stupid minivan doors for hours. I remember, when we had the long-term Pacifica hybrid, Wally was just obsessed with the doors. He'd want to go out in the driveway and he'd go in the thing and I'd press the button to close the door. He'd open it and then and then he'd start closing it and I'd open it. It was just nonstop doors. So yeah, having like a little Easter egg hunt to find all the little spots from which to operate the doors will be fun for the kids. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to having something comfortable to put the whole family in. I mean, it's that's a hard thing to find. We've got the Palisade that does a pretty good job of that, but not as good a job as a minivan. And most cars are smaller than the Palisade, and most a lot of. I mean, now people are going with bigger and bigger cars, but still, like a lot of families get by on smaller vehicles. We got by on smaller vehicles for a really long time, and having that space is like more luxurious than any other feature that you could put in a car. Really, just having that extra space for everybody and everything, and then to be just sipping gas the whole way. Yeah, I'm excited to try out some of the tech in it. I remember one thing about it that drove me nuts was the little spot for your phone, the wireless phone charger. It was barely held in by a little like plastic lip, and anytime I turned the corner, the phone would just slide across this little shelf on the dash. I remember that drove me nuts. But other than that, I remember there being some good clever storage, especially up front for the front driver and passenger. Good spots to hold things. So yeah, can definitely put it through its paces.
There's footstools in the back, so you can like slide the captain's chairs back. People can put their feet up. Second row entertainment. We're trying to limit screen time, so we just never fire that one up too much. But it's there. I'm not quite sure. I think you need to pair it with your phone or something. First I thought it was a DVD player. I'm like, well, no, this isn't 1928. Like that's not what that is. Really nice headphones it comes with. Yeah, it's pretty nice. You can put stuff everywhere. There's a million little cubby holes. The center console is mammoth. If I don't forget or don't remember, you'll inherit a huge bottle of sanitizer, which we just put like a jug of it in the center console, and it fits super easily. So it's a really great place for it. Yeah, sorry to see it go. Our long-term fleet, I think, is good as it's been in a long time. We've got the EV6, which we're all enjoying. I just got through that. This is very solid. And the 330e, that's a little more of a complicated vehicle, but I think that's a good thing. It's a lot for us to kind of go through.
Yeah, for sure. The 330e is, I mean, we're going from that as a plug-in hybrid to this is a hybrid. I'm curious. I mean, obviously, having the electric range in the 330e is a good thing, but having just like the effortless mileage of Toyota's got such a good standard hybrid system that it's a joy to use. Just really pain free and efficient. So definitely looking forward to getting into that.
Sounds good. So let's transition over to the 40th anniversary 4Runner. I'm kind of jealous. This looked really cool. You must have had fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, look cool is about all it did differently from any other 4Runner. Yeah. But it definitely looks cool. When it showed up in my driveway, my wife was like, "What is that?" I'm like, I looked out the window. I was like, "Oh, that's sweet." I love the heritage, colored decals. That there's a little diagonal stripe on the grill, and then it goes all along the side and up behind the window. There's those bronze wheels. I thought looked really good. Just that red paint on that one was really pretty too. But with the bronze sort of accenting all that, I thought it looked really good. So this has up front on the grill, it's got the word Toyota spelled out instead of just Toyota badge. It's got the words, the lettering, all in that bronze finish. It's got those I think 17-inch bronze wheels. It's got that decal across the grill and across the sides. On the rear, it has a 40th anniversary badge on the tailgate. Inside, it's got a little badge on the dash, numbered badge. This one said 1 out of 4,040. There's sort of bronze stitching on the seats and the doors and the armrest and the gear shifter. And then 40th anniversary logo embossed on the front headrests, and then 40th anniversary logo in the floor mats. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole package. But man, I got a lot of comments on it. Got a lot of looks from people. Going to pick Wally up from school, parking at the top of the hill. As soon as I walk in the door, his teacher, his principal, and his music teacher were asking me about it. They really like it's the graphics and that's what they could see from where they were the red color, that stripe of the orange, red, and yellow, and then the bronze of the wheels, and that was enough to get them asking questions about it. And it looks really cool, and on a 4Runner, which already looks really cool. But other than that, typical 4Runner, super squishy suspension, which normally I'd be complaining about, things rolling around on the floor every time I brake or accelerate. But right now it's that season where our roads are just absolutely cratered, just from all the freeze thaw, and they haven't started patching everything yet. So, really comfortable going down the road over those really, really bad roads, just giant potholes. This thing's just slurped them up. Really, really, really just nice to drive. The tech doesn't bother me as much as I remember it used to. I think the age of this thing, I've sort of come to grips with that. This is sort of like a really old platform, and it used to be like, why aren't they updating this? Why aren't they updating this? And now it's like, they should just keep it like this as long as they can. This is like it feels like throwback, and it feels kind of pure and good in that way.
I agree with you completely on that one.
I mean, not everybody wants that, but the people that want that, they've got the 4Runner that they can look to. Go find one at their dealership and get that old school feeling. But yeah, that's pretty much the 40th anniversary. Oh, my Nalgene bottle, my 32 ounce Nalgene bottle. It's one of the few cars I've ever found where it actually fits in the cup holder. The cup holders have these inserts that I was like trying to put it, and I was testing out different bottles and it wouldn't fit. And I looked closer and like saw that there were actually inserts and it said remove for larger cups. So I did that and was like, oh, this is still not going to fit perfectly. So you could put 2 Nalgenes in the front cup holders and 2 Nalgenes in the rear fold down armrest cup holders. And, I was really impressed with that. The only other cars I can think of that could do that, there was Lexus GX, I think, would fit a Nalgene, and the Chrysler Pacifica could. Those are the only ones that I've tested that I can remember that will hold a Nalgene in the actual cup holders. Usually you can fit it or not usually, sometimes you can fit it in a door pocket or something. Usually it just has to ride shotgun or, on the floor or knocking around in some cargo bin. But yeah, it's passed the Nalgene test. It was great.
That's impressive. You'll have to really see what you can do with the Sienna. They said up to 18 cup holders. Haven't counted them all, but there's a lot of cup holders in that thing too.
Toyota really does cup holders well. I remember
I was thinking that
there was I think it was a Tundra once. I was looking at some of my old tweets after figuring out the Nalgene thing in this, and there was a Tundra I think that had like 13, 14 cup holders in it. It's just great. I don't know. Typical Americans, we love our cup holders, but hey, I bring a lot of beverages along. I'm a thirsty guy.
No, I am the same. I like to have the water. I like to have a mug of coffee, sometimes a snack. I'm with you. And Toyota is good too. It seems like anecdotally in some Lexus models, you could bring like the wide, like almost like camping mugs. Mm-hmm. They don't have handles. Most automakers, you can't get those into their cup holders. Ford, like the F-150, usually you can do it. Dodge usually, or Ram usually you can with their like monster center console. You can just put it on the tray next to you.
Yeah.
But, smaller cars, smaller vehicles, a lot of crossovers even, you can't do that. So, yeah, man, I like my drinks on the road, my coffee, caffeinated drinks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to not have to have them like unsecured and within easy reach. One of the little things in life that I appreciate.
It's the little things that matter, man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell me about this Infiniti you're driving.
So I was out in Oregon on my spring break, and that's what I drove. I drove it all over the state. We didn't really use the third row. As a third row, we used that extra space for all our luggage for a family of 4 for a week of vacationing in, when we needed lots of changes of clothes for getting muddy and getting wet and stuff. It worked really well. It's been a while since I've driven an Infiniti in general, and this one was, it was well suited to the task. Felt really nice inside. Lots of good spots for plugging in phones. Got USB, USB-C, wireless charger. The all-wheel drive was really helpful because we went out onto the coast and visited my best friend from kindergarten, Luke, and he lives on some property kind of up in the coastal mountains above Nesco in Oregon, and he's got this road that's not paved, nor is there's no gravel or anything. It's just grass and dirt and when it rains, mud. And they have a little campsite up there. And so I sort of followed him around, and I was able to get up there when he was telling me stories about how, the week before or not too long before, people had gotten stuck, and then the truck getting him out had gotten stuck. And it was able to really do these steep, slippery inclines without a lot of slippage. on all season tires. I was pretty impressed with how well it's all the drive was sorted out. And generally speaking, it was comfortable going down the road. The suspension is a little stiff. So the ride, which I liked on the sort of for something so big on a lot of these curvy coastal roads, it makes going around the corners easier without a lot of body roll and stuff. But if you were going over uneven pavement, it was bouncing people around a lot. My wife's very prone to car sickness, but she wasn't too bad on this trip. This thing was pretty comfortable, and yeah, like tons of room. I mean, it's a pretty small third row. It's smaller than like the QX80, but it you fold that thing down and just had tons of room. We had 3 hard suitcases, a stroller, just a bunch of boots and all this other stuff, jackets, and just throwing stuff in there as we're changing layers for the weather constantly. And it felt perfectly fine, on those wooded roads and on the coast, and it looked perfectly at home, on the city streets of the Pearl District in Portland. But yes, so I was actually a little bit surprised at how much I enjoyed driving it, and getting reacquainted with this particular Infiniti. Yeah, not bad.
QX60 is one of the earlier vehicles that it's a larger crossover, but it's not enormous. Like there's a QX80, obviously. It seemed like Infiniti was among the first to get that third row in there. And I remember people were thinking, well, what are they doing there? But now it's just ubiquitous. Like everything is 3 rows, basically. Even some relatively small vehicles. Like I think the GLB, for example, you could get a third row randomly, and then you fold it down or use it, as you see fit. So that's kind of my takeaway on that. And this was a rental, I assume?
No, it was, they have a press fleet out in Portland. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I mean, James used to live out there.
Oh, so. Right. That's true. So it's interesting because I was going to say, when we went to Gulf Shores, we saw a ton of Infinitis as rentals. And I was like, anecdotally, are they dumping these things into the rental fleets or something? But yeah, that also makes sense. Press fleet.
Yeah. One thing I didn't do was take it into the Cascades. Didn't have, tire chains, and it didn't have winter tires on it. And they had just gotten a bunch of snow. It was one thing we considered doing. If they hadn't gotten snow, we were going to go up to Bend and look at some of the volcanic stuff. There's just so much to do in Oregon, and you have to drive everywhere to do it. But you don't have to drive super far to do a lot of it. But man, I can't wait to go back. Can't wait to go back to Oregon. It's one of the top states of mine to drive through, and that coastal highway is one of my favorite drives of all time. It's one of the things that made me want to get a Beetle, because that same friend Luke, who lives out on the coast, years ago when I had moved out to Midwest, I went back to visit him, and he had a couple Beetles, and we just drove one down the coast, and we're just bombing down the highways in the rain, and it just felt like so much fun. It's a memory I treasure very much, and really made me want a Beetle, and now I've got that Beetle, and I get to sort of keep making new memories. But going out on those coastal highways in anything really is always a treasure. And it's just those are great roads, especially you can see they get landslides and stuff, so you can see spots where the roads have been washed away in previous years and rebuilt, and it's always an adventure.
Sounds awesome. That's on the list of places I'd like to see. I like that type of climate. Sort of like those 2 corners of the country, I think could be fodder for family trips, Oregon and then North and South Carolina. I know we have some friends who are going to Charleston, which sounds interesting. It's a nice blend of history, beach, good, architecture and restaurants, just a lot of stuff, that you can could check out.
Yeah, we saw a bunch of waterfalls. Wally was really excited to see, parts of the Lewis and Clark Trail. Yeah, it's just really, really neat out there.
All right. Sounds good. Well, that's future spending my monies on vacations. You never regret any money you spend on vacation, I think, So,
No.
It's life experience. But should we spend some money?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. So Matt is writing in, recently moved to work full-time from home. So realistically, he does not need his daily driver anymore. For the grocery getting and just general stuff, he's using his partner's EconoBox and a 2015 Fiesta ST. Okay, doesn't get much use. So this being the case, he's like, hey, I want to get something that's going to be fun, nights out, cars and coffee, maybe a track day a few times a month. So the criteria is stick shift, rear wheel drive, budget's 40 grand, could maybe push it to 50. He's been looking at Mustang GTs. Some of the special editions are a few years old, could be interesting, or E92 M3s. Let me know what you guys think. So I think you're on the right path with those two. But what else are you thinking there, John?
Well, it's funny. This was sort of my situation when I had my WRX. And it was just sitting there not getting used. And, I got rid of it, and then I wanted a new car, and I ended up with the car I had always wanted, which was a Beetle. So my advice to you is, that's a pretty good price range to give you a lot of leeway and if you can, if it's something you don't need to drive every day, like you've got your partner's car to use, get the car you've always wanted.
Yeah.
Whatever that is within that price range. Even if it's unreliable, or you're going to have to, do your own work on it quite a bit. Now's the opportunity to do that. That being said, looking at what you've suggested, the E92 M3, that's awesome. I mean, it's a neat time in sort of that model's lineage. It's a naturally aspirated a V8, I believe, which is sort of a neat thing to get right now and hold on to as more cars are going electric. If a V8 is such a car culture touchstone that seems to be a dying breed right now. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's a neat one to have. That's probably what I mean. You've had a Ford for 12 years, or you have a 12-year-old Ford, and so you're and it's a sporty Ford, and you've had that Ford lifestyle for a while. If I were you, I mean, I love the Mustang, but I would switch it up. I would go BMW. I think E92 M3 would be a good one, and you've got some wiggle room. You do your research, look for some of the pitfalls, and you've got enough budget there to avoid some of the mechanical pitfalls that you might run into. But yeah, so get your whatever car you've always wanted, that's that you loved since you were a kid. And if that's the E92 M3, even better.
Yeah, well said. I don't think you're going to go wrong. Check out the E92. You can do some research on things you should know before getting into one of those cars. I just did a quick Google search and some interesting stories came up. So I did, recommend you check those out. Whether it's a Mustang, which I don't think you'll go wrong with a Mustang. You can get a lot of Mustang for 40 or 50 grand. Whether it's the E92, this is one of those moments where I think you would say, what do you want, and try to feed that impulse. So I think that's a good move. Just looking across the field, I like the 2023 Nissan Z car. I think that's a lot of fun. It's rear wheel drive. It's a manual transmission. It's a kind of fun throwback design. Just if you're like, looking for other ideas. That's one to me that kind of does cut through the clutter a little bit. I think it's a lot of fun to drive. It's, it's a little less practical for like, daily pursuits. So that's one where if, that happens to be on your short list, I drove it. I thought it was fun. There's that. And then if you're, again, like John, you mentioned about like the V8, last call for the Charger and the Challenger as we know them, could be an interesting thing to get into. Certainly those are rear wheel drive and V8s, depending on the model you choose. So that could be good. Another one too, I think could be interesting as it really, is running up the clock is the Camaro. You're either going to be a Camaro person or you're not. Yeah. But that could be one you want to look at too. So all of the pony cars out there, I think are worth considering. And if you've ever been like, that's been on your, like the poster on your wall, it sounds like you're in a position right now where now's the time you can make that call. So.
And the Camaro, while it may not have, the soul of some of the other pony cars, I think it's maybe perhaps the best to drive sort of from a technical standpoint. Especially with the stick shift, it's pretty fun to if you're going to take it out to a track or something, that'd be the one.
Of course, Miata. You'll save some money too if you go with the Miata. So, those are certainly fun in all conditions. All right, Matt, let us know what you're going to do. We're very, very interested to find out. So that's all the time we have this week. If you enjoy the podcast, we hope you do. Please leave us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get the show. Send us more of your Spend My Monies. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.